jump into this.
Or should we do a round of introduction? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fatma Naqvi. I'm Senior Social Protection Specialist and one of the team leaders leading on this piece of work advancing digital payments in social protection systems. Really look forward to the discussion this afternoon, and I'm based here in Uganda in the World Bank Kampala office.
Thanks, Fatima. So, Julian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Julian Roeju is my name. I'm a senior business analyst from NITA, Uganda. Glad to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Buku from Equity Bank.
Good afternoon. My name is Gerald Otim. I'm the CEO at Nsibuko.
Thank you. And Stephen, do you want to introduce your team who are joining in online from MTN? Okay. We don't have Stephen responding yet, but I think our colleague Bongisa would like to say hello very quickly. She's based out in South Africa, and she's one of our task team leaders. Bongisa? That's a good question. Hi, Bongisa. Can you hear us? And if you can, would you kindly introduce yourself?
Hi, Fatima. I don't know if you can hear me, but we cannot hear you.
Well, we can hear you, so that's a good thing. Can you hear us now? Hi, Bongisa. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Would you kindly introduce yourself?
Sorry, we didn't get the introductions for the people in the room. It would be really good if we can also hear who's in the room. But let me go. My name is Bongisa Legeza. I'm a social protection and job specialist. I am part of this team. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this important deliberation today. Over to you, Ernest. Thanks.
Thank you.
Julian Roeju is my name from NITA, Uganda.
Nathan Buku, Equity Bank.
Gerald Otim, CEO at Nsibuko.
Thank you so much. So I see Stephen Mutana, you have your team from MTN online. Could you just say hello very quickly? And I also see Beatrice Mawemuko, I believe that is from Centenary Bank. Just say hello really quickly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrice Mawemuko, Head of Strategic Partnerships from MTN Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see David Kajoba, if you could just quickly introduce yourself, and Elizabeth Wahito, like where you're from also.
Good afternoon. My name is David Kajoba. part of the aggregators working with.
Good afternoon, team. My name is Elizabeth Wahito, Equity Bank.
Okay, and then
good afternoon. My name is Steven Mutana, CEO Mobile Money Uganda.
thank you. And then I see Mark and Moses Nyanzi and Sandra Namazi. If you could just quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll move straight into the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Chivumbi, Head E-commerce and Open API in MTN Mobile Money.
Well, thank you. So right now, let me have Delia just start us off into the presentation, which is exactly what we're here for.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Delia Dean, and I will be...
Sorry, Delia, just
Sure.
1 second. I thought that because I was trying to catch time, I had skipped Fatima. Fatima, would you kindly give us a brief overview of what we're trying to achieve as the bank? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ernest. I'll be brief, but I think given the esteemed participants, I want to make sure that we welcome everyone. So on behalf of the World Bank, I would like to thank all of you for coming. We really appreciate you taking the time out to attend. We know all of you are super busy, and we very much value your input in today's very important discussion. I do want to take a minute to give a background of the World Bank's support of this work of advancing scale-up of social grant programs through digital financial services. As the current COVID pandemic has highlighted, as well as other climate-related shocks in Uganda, that the poor and vulnerable are the worst affected. And given they're the worst affected, they're the ones that need the most timely support. And we still continue to face some stark numbers. 1 in 5 Ugandans still live in extreme poverty. A third of them live on $1.90 a day or less. And beyond poverty, as all of you very well know, that households in Uganda continue to also be very vulnerable. And we have seen that with COVID, right? A lot of the gains we had made on poverty reduction, economic development, human capital development of the poor because of this vulnerability, COVID really has amplified that. And we're seeing a lot of them being pushed back into poverty. So in such a scenario, Uganda needs to have sound social protection systems that are shock responsive and that are able to really respond in a timely manner to these poor and vulnerable households. The evidence that we have from Uganda and of course other countries is that you need these building blocks to develop social protection systems that are shock responsive. And currently in Uganda, we have a good basis, but we're still at early stages of that journey. And what are some of those things that, those building blocks that are very essential to build such a system? One is the need to have a national dynamic, a single registry, which really allows one to identify those poor and vulnerable households, which we launched, Uganda launched a single registry in December last year, but we still have a way to go and we'll talk about that. And then what is really needed is a robust and flexible payment approach to have this comprehensive shock responsive social protection system. And that we'll discuss today, that we have a good basis again, but we are a bit, we have a bit of way to go. And then the third important aspect is to have risk financing options, which allows, of course, quick deployment of financing so we're able to respond to these shocks. With these very important elements, we just want to say, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today, that the World Bank is committed to working very closely with the government and all of you, very other important key stakeholders, to address the gaps that are there in building this social protection system that is shock responsive. Today's stakeholder consultation addresses the issue of developing a robust, flexible payment system. How can we get the support to these poor and vulnerable households quickly and transparently? The World Bank report that we have been working on highlights the constraints and opportunities in advancing digitization of social protection payments in Uganda, and you got the 5-pager, and of course Dilia will also walk us through the presentation. But just the highlights, what the report focuses on is highlighting the benefits and risks of digitization, mapping of the G2P architecture, and its building blocks, and what are the challenges and opportunities. And this is where we're really looking to get your inputs and insights. And of course, what are our existing limitations in scale up and how we can address those barriers. So we recognize that in overcoming these challenges and barriers requires engagement of multiple stakeholders, like all of us that are around the room. And we recognize that all of you in today's meeting are the key stakeholders, and you play a very important role in addressing these challenges and advancing the opportunities in this agenda. Today, after this presentation, we're very much going to be in listening mode because we're here to listen to you. We want your frank feedback, your insights, and your suggestions on the report's findings. And also, we would really like to hear from you what you think are the next steps and how we can work together. I want to take the opportunity again to thank those of you who have already provided extensive engagement and input into the report. We are very appreciative of that. And I want to once again thank all of you who are in the room as well as on the call for your participation. We look forward to the discussion, and we look forward to working with you on advancing this agenda. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dilia.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation that I have today is not going to be new for many of you because these are data and statistics that you mostly use in your industry for designing products, for segmenting your customer base, and in planning your forward-thinking strategies. But the reason I'm going to refresh your minds with this data is because this is the context within which we have to ideate and innovate with regards to deepening and widening our reach of social protection payment services. So the challenges, the opportunities, and some of the risks that we envision are not going to be very new to you, but it's for us to recognize that these are indeed the constraints within which we have to work, but also to identify opportunities within these constraints so that we can scale up. In general, Uganda has a good national social protection policy that is governing all the work that is happening in this space. Currently, we have about 8 million people considered to be living in poverty. That's about 21% of our population. Although we do have some social safety net programs, is a very few and far between, and do not necessarily touch every single category of vulnerability in the country. From the recent COVID execution, I think it was very evident to many of us that urban vulnerability targeting is still lagging behind. I believe you can recall several of the stakeholders scampering around for data. How do we identify and make sure that we are capturing everybody in the urban centers and not leaving anybody behind? So there's still room to do with regards to urban targeting. And from the lady we heard this morning from Give Directly, there is definitely something we can do with regards to mobile network operator data to enhance beneficiary targeting. Very happy to receive the folks from Airtel Uganda. Welcome. And you came at the right time. Sorry about that. So overall, we're only reaching about 3% of the population, but we believe that with digital tools plus other interventions, we can definitely scale up and reach more people and also minimize resource duplication and leakage. So overall, the purpose of our convening is to work towards developing a comprehensive, shock responsive social protection system to reduce vulnerabilities and promote inclusive growth. As the larger World Bank project, there are 4 components. The first one being development of a dynamic social registry, because this is really the bedrock of any sustainable and holistic social protection network system. The second part is developing a dynamic payment system, which is what brings us here in this discussion today. The third will be development of a risk financing strategy. Fatima and colleagues at the bank are working closely with the government on this aspect, as well as progressing policy and dialogue on where we can definitely do better. Our process has been very consultative, basically. We started out with a mapping exercise and understanding the DFS gaps in the ecosystem. We're now at the second stage where we are doing the stakeholder consultations, really relaying back what our findings are for yourselves to validate and to discuss with us. And then from there, we will then conduct an enabling environment and digital readiness assessment. And this will be more technical to really understand whether the technical infrastructure is at the adequate level we need it to be. And even if it is not, how do we work within the technological constraints to deliver an ideal delivery mechanism? Many of you know this Vinscope statistics with regards to financial inclusion. Uganda, in the region, Uganda is privileged that we do have a significant number that are enabled, and this has been predominantly driven by the mobile phone technology. And our telco partners will understand the relevance and significance of this, the fact that we're now able to reach people through these devices that we may never have been able to do so. Despite this increased access to financial services, we do, of course, have to acknowledge that there is a gender disparity in access to whether it's the devices, the cost of the devices, or the cost of maintaining and using the internet. However, we can still identify ways to work around these challenges to make sure that we do include more females. We do have a digital and financial literacy challenge nationally, and particularly very outstanding in the rural areas. Again, what tools, what services can we leverage to mitigate against this literacy so that it's not the stumbling block for actually leveraging technology as an enabler? With regards to the barriers for uptake, it's our traditional barriers, it's device ownership and penetration, it's the financial and digital literacy, and very key that came up in the discussion we had this morning is identity, the access to an identity card, the standardization of these ID cards, the ability to verify and validate the identity, the extent to which biometrics are collected and the validity of these biometrics, the ability for different systems to speak to each other and share this identity information is a space that needs significant improvement for sure. On the supply side, we are privileged to be in an ecosystem where the National Payment Systems Act has enabled an agency banking model, which means that now more than before, banks can reach non-traditional last mile places and serve rural communities. The mobile networks were the first to use an agency model, and so we have a combination of bank and mobile money agents. However, this footprint in rural is still not adequate enough for us to execute to the desired levels. Most of the agents are heavily concentrated in the urban and peri-urban areas. Coupled with agent presence has to do with agent liquidity and agent quality. The further away you go from the supervision of the lead institution or the owner institution. And when it comes to social protection payments with regards to consumer satisfaction, quality, fraud, and recourse mechanism, the further removed that the agents are from the supervision and quality control, the more risky our beneficiaries find themselves. We do also have in the ecosystem a select number of financial service providers that we consider to be rural-centric. It's in the fabric of their commercial strategies. They are committed to delivering to the last mile, and so have some very rich lessons to share with us on how to test, refine, iterate, and do it all over again. We also definitely want to explore how do we leverage and bring in SACCOs and VSLA, because the reality is for many of the people we're targeting, this is their primary source of financial services, the SACCOs and the VSLAs. So how are we, I'm very happy that Nita Yu is here and we can have these discussions to really understand how do we make use of a primary source, of a primary service provider that for the most part is really out of mainstream conversation. Let's see. I've spoken about this with regards to access to financial services for women, the cost of implementation for most of private sector, where the constant question comes up, what is the business case for serving the last mile? And so perhaps also in these discussions, we could try and unpack some of this, how do we over time, it may not be in the immediate future, but how do we over time build an ecosystem that is commercially viable for both public and private sector? Key to note, the last bullet point really speaks to the humble recognition that adoption of new technologies, be they mechanical or digital, it takes time. It's complex, it's lengthy, it's costly, but it has to be done. And it's our task to figure out, again, how do we do it in a scalable and sustainable manner to bring along everyone in the last mile, making sure that the vulnerable are not left behind. Currently, we do have the benefit of the e-pay gateway that's been developed by Nita Yu. However, we do recognize that this gateway has greater potential and is underutilized. One of the challenges that's come through from many stakeholders is the commercial rates at which stakeholders can integrate with or interface with this platform, in addition to perhaps some technicalities around just integration. We are hopeful, though, again, as we progress this work, that more and more entities can be onboarded onto the platform, because for the platform prices to also drop, there has to be scale, right? So in a way, there's almost a chicken and egg situation, but I think we can arrive at an ideal situation for all. The existing government policy is also restrictive, because to date, the government only mandates that wages, which are public service wages, and supplier payments go through IFMIS, right? All the other, there's a multitude of payments in the government ecosystem that are not going through IFMIS. And then what that does is it alters the rate at which we can actually scale and reach, maximum utility of these platforms. Social security payment grant programs are not integrated and are not dispersed through IFMIS. This is also another area for us to consider and progress as well. We also recognize that in the market where we are, given the different dynamics with regards to the DFS pillar foundations, that is in terms of the infrastructure, the consumer base, the dispersed populations, no one service provider can sustainably serve all the target populations. And so what this means, it's an opportunity to have more service providers at the table, which then increases beneficiary choice, increases convenience for the beneficiaries, the quality of services being delivered, because now private sector competes from a genuine perspective and understands and segments their market better, and hopefully also better protects the end user. Another limitation that the World Bank is working on has to do with the rigid government PPDA procurement regulations that kind of have their hands handcuffed, meaning you restrict yourself to one vendor at a time, regardless of the quality of service that's being delivered. So how do we unlock this non-beneficial arrangement where we can have the government procure services from multiple vendors and really have a competitive market for government services? Very important that Fatima mentioned is the absence of a single registry. We have very dispersed data sets across the different MDAs. How do we get these data sets to speak to each other so that we avoid duplication, right? We need to be able to know that household A is receiving services from agency X, Y, and Z. Maybe they're okay. They don't need to be onboarded onto the next program. Or maybe they've graduated out of program Y and we can add them onto the next batch of beneficiaries. So having this registry will also help prediction, right? It'll enable Uganda to be shock responsive and make sure that the vulnerable don't fall through the cracks. Through support from FSDU, we're grateful that the payment standards and guidelines that govern G2P payment service provider contracts and obligations have been drafted. However, these have not yet been socialized and really taken up and enforced. So in the next phase, we look forward to seeing that some of these guidelines are actually enforced. And one of the primary outcomes of this will be, at the end of the day, is improved consumer protection. I've spoken about cost of G2P. The last point speaks to the fact that a lot of our government programs are heavily subsidized. However, we do recognize that funding across the globe for very many of these programs is dwindling. So how do we leverage technology to ensure that even the small basket that we have is very adequately and efficiently utilized and actually reaching those that need these resources? So it's almost like we have a fixed timeline, and it's not one of those things of, oh, we'll get to it when we get to it. The reality is we need to figure it out now, given the resource constraint. The social protection delivery chain has 4 major components. There is the assessment stage, the enrollment, provision of the benefits, and then the management. Specifically for our dialogue today, we are going to focus on the provision aspect. How do we use digital technologies? And this is not even just speaking about the cash, the depositing of funds onto a digital account and the cash out, but even the digital tools of the system speaking to each other, the validation processes, the APIs that need to be in place so that there is seamless flow of information. There are, for government-to-person payments, there are basically 3 building blocks, right? The first one is familiar to most of the people in this room because that's the space that you are in, right? It's the need for connectivity, where our telecom partners come in because it's really the bedrock of what we're trying to do. In addition, well, I guess the two go together, the connectivity and then the single social registry. We need the ID systems from NERA and any other public body that does ID data collection, national payment system, and the trusted data sharing is what I was talking about. We have a lot of rich data sets, but they're not speaking to each other. We have the central treasury system, the sectorial databases and systems, and the account directory, regardless of where these accounts may be sitting. In the middle of this, we have the enablers for accessible and choice-based G2B payments. And choice here comes in, given the financial capability of our beneficiaries, can they pick for themselves the right financial tool? Is it to cash out at an ATM? Is it to cash out at a bank agent? Is it to cash out at a mobile money agent? Or is there even a preference of, I don't want cash, I just want a digital voucher that I can take to the clinic or the pharmacy and get ABC medication? Or can I just exchange the voucher for school fees at the nearest school? So we have the distribution networks and access points, which I mentioned, the agents. We have the bank and non-bank payment service providers, accounts and payment instruments. Like I mentioned, is it mobile money, card, and so on? The payment acceptance networks. And then finally, the third building block is inclusion and empowerment accelerators. What is our role in ensuring that the beneficiaries actually have the right tools and information to, one, protect themselves against fraud, two, report incidences of when this fraud has happened, and many other threats and risks that they may be exposed to by adopting new technologies they're not familiar with. And so ideally, as a country, we would want to move to what is called the G2P Infrastructure 4.0. As a country, most of our programs, if you look at it, if you think through some of the programs that have in effect, like SAGE, NUSAF, these disability grants, most of them operate at a G2P 1.0 or 1.5. It's basically one public entity, one service provider, who then, the most digital part of the transaction is to go from the account of the government to the service provider, and then thereafter the money enters into a cash ecosystem. What we would ideally want to grow and progress towards is an ecosystem 4.0 where multiple vendors are involved at the discretion of the end users. Who do they want to be serviced by based on what's proximate to them and what they're familiar with? And you have multiple access points, and we have multiple payment mechanisms as well. And case in point where some of this is already being in implementation, we would look in our context would be Zambia and Kenya. So ideally, we would want to move towards there. So for us, the next steps for us, having just done the ecosystem mapping, we are going to do a payment systems readiness diagnostic. Again, it's really see where we're sitting with the interaction between NERA, MNOs, banks, NITA-U, so that we can understand what's the bare minimum that we have that is functional for us to get a pilot kick-started. Because if we wait for that ultimate perfect time when all systems are in sync, we may wait for a long time. So it's about understanding what's low-hanging fruit right now that we can leverage and kind of shift the objective forward a little bit. We will then do stakeholder consultations with yourselves on our findings of that. We will then follow this up with a pilot design, consult you on your thoughts of have we thought through this design the right way and what things should be changed about the pilot design. And then we will execute the pilot and then follow this with further consultations, sharing our lessons learned. And then hopefully we should be in a better place than we are now and closer to having a robust social protection response system. Now we will go into the questions for discussion. Anis, back to you.
Delia, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I recognize that 3 colleagues joined in just after we had started. If you would kindly introduce yourself, starting with the lady to my right.
Thanks, Ernest. My name is Martha Tukey. I manage the corporate business under Airtel Money. Thank you.
Thank you. And the gentleman in the white shirt.
Thank you. I am Andrew Rugamba. I am the acting director at Airtel Money.
And the gentleman in the jacket.
Michael Jingo is my name. General Manager, Commercial Banking, Centenary Bank. Delighted to be here.
All right. I was trying to sound anonymous, but we know each other. These are all our friends. So speaking of being friends, we have coffee outside. So it's a working session. We want to have some very good deliberation here. Feel free to just get up, step outside, grab a coffee. And for those of our colleagues who are listening online, this next part of the session is to get your quick reflections. The room and those who are online, we just want to hear quickly from you, what are your thoughts on what you have seen from the report? And just go for it. Put the microphone on and tell us what your initial reflections are of the discussion that we've just had, the presentation from Delia.
Thank you so much. My name is Nathan from Equity. From Equity Bank, we are seeing an opportunity and we're seeing something we can partner in with the government. We have partnered with other development partners in delivering assistance for refugees. We're currently doing about 60,000 payments every month. So we are ready and we have the ecosystem. I did not see anything new that needs to be done from our end. We are ready, plug and pray. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay.
Mr. Jingo, your microphone is on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't switch it off, but again, I have something to say. Well, we're doing quite
Just move in closer to the microphone. With the masks on, it's difficult for us to be heard online.
Oh. Well, it is a new normal that we have to wear these masks, and apologies. Drawing your attention to social protection, of course, at Centenary Bank, we're doing quite a bit for SAGE, where we're doing payments for over 500,000 beneficiaries in over 130 districts. But the challenge that we are encountering, and I didn't see it come through, is on the systems front, where we all know that many times the systems that we craft are enabled by internet, by data, and the data is within the urban and the peri-urban. So that infrastructure to support the payments in over 70% of the pay points is not available. So you run many times on offline, which is also another huge challenge. I just wanted to see whether we have plans of supporting connectivity to the deep-most areas. And of course, the other matter would be around the infrastructure itself, the connectivity, the systems that can be able to support the social protection. Then the other matter is certainly around the amounts that we do. I don't want to say they are very little, but they could be better. For some beneficiaries, yes, they have done some sizable, some significant change. Well, it's not a secret, we're doing 25,000 per month. If you're giving it to a Kampala dweller, that is maybe an eighth of the spend per day. But deep in the villages, yes, they're able to buy a few drugs, a few little things to live on, but there is a lot of room for improvement, and we need to probably cast that ballpark number, that ballpark amount, looking at rural areas, peri-urban and the urban areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The report seems to suggest that we need to adapt a more inclusive approach towards the delivery of social protection payments. And I love the fact that it highlights the need to bring SACCOs and savings groups on the table, because when we talk about last mile financial services, we can almost, it's impossible not to talk about SACCOs and savings groups. And for a very long time, these are stakeholders that have been ignored when you talk about the financial services ecosystem. And yet, they are actually the people that are delivering these services to the very last mile. So I'm happy that the report highlights that. And I hope that in the pilot, we will be able to test out some models that include SACCOs and savings groups. I'm also happy that fintechs like myself, like Nsibuko have been brought on the table to discuss these ideas, because I think that there's a lot that fintechs could contribute to this strategy and these models. And I think that a strategy that is as inclusive as that includes telecom companies, MNOs, financial institutions, SACCOs, and fintechs, might actually allow us to score some great mileage and success. Thank you.
And I was trying to wait for everybody to finish.
I also like that suggestion, being the regulator. You first
exactly. So
first listen to the people you regulate.
To everybody so that I can be the last to come in. So can I hear everybody else before I can come in?
Yes. Andrew, when they say everybody else, they mean you and Martha. Stop acting like they're talking about other people. Go for it.
And you're a bully. So, thank you
and
very much.
MTN Online.
Thank you very much, Delia, for that comprehensive presentation. And just to complement what my colleague Gerald has just spoken about, we cannot underplay the role of VSLAs and SACCOs in the last mile of social protection. Key example is we've just engaged a cooperative of farmers that are going to be paid in a digital manner, and already the ask is that some of the farmers want to be paid in their SACCO. So that can never be underplayed, and I'm happy that we have recognized that and are bringing it onto the table. Now, secondly, what I think is key and is important for the delivery of these programs is the management of liquidity and cash. Because if we are to be honest with each other, what we are seeing happening now is that disbursements are done from a central location, probably in the urban areas like Kampala. Then vans of cash drive to the rural areas for the very same beneficiaries to cash out. So I don't really think it is true digitization. I think what we need to focus on more is building an ecosystem where the beneficiaries of these disbursements can actually use the disbursements without us having to cash them out fast. Okay, so part of the cost that is ramping up the cost of these social protection programs is that cost of CIT, the cost of people that are moving the money from Kampala to support people in, say, Kaberamaido to cash out. So you have a van of cash following the digital disbursement, and this ramps up the risk and hence ramps up the cost. So I think we should focus on deliberately and in a very conclusive manner, build a digital ecosystem around our beneficiaries. So where do they buy their food? Who do they pay? Where do they get their medical bills? Where do they take their children to school? Where do they worship? We need to digitize all those last mile legs, and that's when we will probably have a true and much more cost-effective social protection program. Thank you.
Just not to disappoint you, Ernest. So for me, two things really stand up, and this is more from the experience that we've had from doing such programs with UN agencies for a couple of years now. So two things. One, on our data quality. Data seems to be a very big issue when it comes to us trying to confirm and actually say this person is a refugee and this person actually needs support from the government or from any UN agency. How do we actually make sure that the data that we have is accurate, is clear, that then the MNOs and the banks are able to support? Because that has been one of the key hindrances when it came to supporting these types of programs. And the second one is, how do we now move beyond just sitting as a telecom or just a bank to actually now working and synchronizing our systems to make it as easy as possible for people to say, listen, I've gotten a disbursement from my mobile phone. How can I easily use bank services without having to necessarily go through the hassle of opening a bank account and actually using the services within the bank? So that true interoperability will actually play a very big role when it comes to actually making these programs successful within the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Stephen, do you want to say something? You and the team from MTN that are online.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the noise in my background. So I think I'd like to take up on two, maybe re-echo 2 points, one from Andrew and then the most recent speaker. And this obviously is embedded in the last initiative for us, which was the disbursement of the COVID-19 funds by the government a few months ago during the lockdown. And I would just like to re-echo what the previous speakers just mentioned, which was around identification of the vulnerable or the vulnerable people, and by this even much wider, the refugees, etc. But maybe refugees are most.
Hello? I beg the room not to make any comment about the network. Especially the competition. This is a caveat. I will not have Martha or Rugamba to say anything at all in that line because you will derail this conversation. Maybe it's the network at the Serena. Thank you, Fatima. The World Bank is always in the right room to be neutral. The network of the Serena will take the bill. We'll take the bill for that. We'll handle that.
Do I presume?
Hello, Stephen. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did I lose you?
Yes, you lost us. The Serena Hotel failed.
Yes, the chain of communication is very complex. There are many actors. So yeah. But can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I was just saying very quickly that what the previous speaker just mentioned around identification of the vulnerable people. In our last engagement, especially around the disbursement of the COVID-19 funds, where we were partnering with Airtel and the government in order to effect this. One of the biggest issues was the identification of the vulnerable people. So there needs to be a sustainable mechanism and means of not only identifying, but updating that database. So there's that bit. Now you alluded, I think it was Delia, when she was presenting, that somebody from Give Directly did mention this as an issue this morning. Indeed it is. And again, there's also the dynamic identification of vulnerable people. Because I may not be vulnerable today, and then the pandemic comes along, I lose my job or lose my sense of livelihood, and then I become vulnerable. There are means and ways of identifying the flags that show vulnerability. And we can do this with, and we've done with Give Directly, spoke about this, we've done it with Give Directly. So there are certain algorithms that can pick these patterns of flags. And this can also be an additive to a robustly maintained national database, just to show some of the emergent areas, or both areas and people who may be affected or have become vulnerable. So that's the first bit around one source of truth. The next, which I think Andrew pointed out, was it's not just a matter of dispersing the funds. What Andrew talked about also was an ecosystem where they can then utilize the funds. So it speaks to the availability of agents with the right liquidity, speaks to merchants where they can actually go and spend these monies or the benefits and all. The third one, which I have never got an answer to, and it did come up when we're doing the whole COVID thing, and it kind of hints to vouchers, but even vouchers don't give me a very sustainable way of managing the opportunity, is suppose I don't have a phone. How do I get included, or some kind of smart device? How do I get included in these digital mechanisms? You may speak of a voucher, but most times vouchers are a one-time kind of solution. I have to withdraw everything. Do we need to think of vouchers that people can, I don't have a phone, but I have this voucher. Can I can it be treated as some kind of wallet where I can actually get what I need and not get everything, that kind of thing. And then like the gentleman from Centenary mentioned, how do we handle the issues of fraud, especially around vouchers, around people who are in a situation you don't really, you know they're vulnerable, but then you're trying to understand who are they. And I think your paper hinted to some other forms of identification if they don't have a national ID, which in most vulnerable situations and theaters is a reality. You see somebody's vulnerable, but they don't have the national ID. Does it mean you exclude them? So yeah, those would be the three aspects from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I see a message here from David Kajova. He says, my contribution sides with the comments that were raised by Michael. The distribution network has been seen to lie more in the rural areas that have many schools, circles, hospitals, all of which can act as payment points. And he goes on to say, for the success of projects such as SAGE, the enabling or easing of policy to enable many people become paying points, withdraw or deposit, such as schools, hospitals, using a multitude of paying platforms such as agency, mobile money, and your remit applications will promote convenience of use. Thank you for that comment, David. Is there any other comment online very quickly? If not, I would like us to move into another part of this discussion. Before I actually forget, thank you so much for this feedback. But and now the regulator, Julian. Hi.
You know, you're scaring everybody when you talk about regulator. We work very closely with all the stakeholders in here. The only difference for them, they're making money. For us, it's social services. So for us as NITA, again, for those who joined in a bit late, my name is Julian Roeju. I'm from NITA, Uganda. Very good friends with all of you. We've worked in many projects with most of the stakeholders. Probably comment first and foremost, World Bank has supported NITA to build infrastructure, which is very key in everything that we do. As long as we're talking about digital, infrastructure is very key, and they have supported us to build. And the theme behind was build once, reuse all. And we're trying to run away from having many people building things, and then we're all over the place, okay? So in all our discussion for us as NITA, one thing that we have at the back of the mind, can we build something that everybody will use, okay? We have succeeded with the SMS gateway. Most government agencies are at least comfortable. We are still trying to improve on the e-payment gateway, which is very key in today's meeting. At the end of the day, as government, we don't want many banks going to the many agencies or institutions. Telecos, of course, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, they're all over the place. Can we use one? And we all benefit, work with all banks, all telecos. At the end of the day, yes, that's what we're looking at. So in our discussion, we have that at the back of our mind. I want to also concur with many of the speakers about the registry. As noted, NITA was spearheading that COVID money. And we got a problem with the registry. People were registering afresh, when actually, as government, we should have had either from Ministry of Gender or somewhere a complete registry of the people who are, but we're registering afresh, and all the things that happened, But yes, that has to come out clearly, and that is the starting point. Usually technology is not difficult. It is usually the other things that complicate things. But once we have that right, and who owns that? Who owns that registry for the social protection? Is it Ministry of Gender? And then it comes to the next aspect. Once we have that registry, and remember most MDAs have their own registries okay? And the center of it all is the national ID. With the challenges around national ID, which we are also working on with them. But the national ID is the unique identification here for all the registries that we are having. And we want to try to make sure that it remains the only place where we can identify a person. Even with their challenges, we want to make sure they're the ones who own it. So we are discouraging all other MDAs who, yes, have problems with the national ID data, including the telecos, but it should be. If we're to clean it, then it has to be cleaned from there. So with that, it comes back to another platform. As I said, for us, we are building the infrastructure for people to use. Currently, government of Uganda has an integration platform. It was mentioned in the presentation, which will help us to now. So we have that layer for all MDAs. Currently, we have about 12 MDAs. We're having challenges there. The systems, somebody talked about the way systems are built, the APIs and all that. We are trying to make sure that, but the infrastructure is there, it's working. That is now when the e-payment gateway also can come in, and how the private sector, we are actually now starting to engage the banks, the telecos. How do we leverage on that platform, that integration platform, to access the information that you need? So in all that, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to bring out is build once, reuse. So whatever payment solution or design that we want to use, can we build one thing that we all can use as government? Connectivity. Well, the good thing with our people down there, as long as you have a smartphone, you have money, but what can we do as government? So again, World Bank has helped us to roll out connectivity. And not unfortunately, but the focus, of course, for us as NITA is more on public service, more on the agencies to make sure they're all connected and they can exchange data within government. We are also working with the telecos, I think, to see how we can support our public as well. So yes, there are arrangements with the telecos, but our main focus for us is our citizens, the health center, the schools. We are doing the Wi-Fi's, you've heard of the hotspots to help. We put in the markets, we put at the university, and yeah, even us, we benefit from that. Of course, when you go further, and that's where at least I think NITA as government helps in a bit for the telecos, it's business. You're not going to extend the fiber to or connectivity to where there are no people. Yeah, for you it's money. So it's more concentrated in the urban centers. We are moving out of that, and we're looking at different technologies that we can use to have a wider spread. So yes, World Bank is helping us in that area, and I think we're doing well. We haven't reached everywhere. We are still moving. So we can't say we're there, but yes, it's very key. If we are to help our people, if we provide free Wi-Fi, then yes, they can access. They may not have data on their phones to buy. So our vulnerable people, as long as you have a phone. We have done a few products. Of course, that COVID one was one of them. They didn't have a system. Somebody mentioned about a system. The system that handles the front side before we get to how you disburse the money, that front side. So even that, we need to think when we're building this design, do we have one interface to handle all this? So that we can support and see how to build it. We have where to host it. Back to build one, reuse all. We have a national data center, fully fledged, one of the best in East Africa, actually. It's a tier 3. So we can host. So it's there, it exists. We don't need to think about that. So we did we had to build it from scratch. The one we did for COVID-19, of course, there was nothing. We supported about 500,000 vulnerable people. We are working with another, I don't know which bank is, I think it's UBA, on the e-voucher for farmers, where there's a concept of wallets. Government puts money there, and then you add your money before you can attain a service and so on. We are now looking at how do we add other banks so that it's not just one bank, but how do the other banks benefit in that ecosystem? But at the moment, it's working well. Somebody talked about the vouchers. So if you don't have a phone, what happens? So the e-voucher system, we can rethink and see how to do the offline. I don't know how that will happen, but yes, it's possible. And we have been using the payment gateway. Now, some of the few challenges we have within government is the issue, you mentioned the IFMIS, where everything has to go through IFMIS. We had a small challenge with with URA. They're the ones who collect money. So, but I think let's not get into that. But yes, can we utilize make it better, the existing e-payment gateway, to make sure we have all the telcos on board, to make sure we have all the banks that are capable on board, so that it doesn't look like we're only using one bank and all that, and make it better. And there's room for that. And like you mentioned, the more services we have, the more transactions, the cheaper the cost. That cost element, yes, is a challenge, and it's a problem that we're trying to see. We're actually rethinking of the strategy of what of the e-payment gateway we currently have, so that at the end of the day, how do I help my people down there who, when you talk about the cost of 200 and so on, I mean, that's a lot of money. So yes, I've talked about integration, system,
maybe we can, Julian?
I think that's it from my side.
Maybe we can always come back to the Honorable Member of Parliament from NITA. Sounded very political. This is a technical meeting, but I know you're going to get into the details. That's what I appreciate so much.
No, that's okay. I'm just waiting for the questions.
Yeah.
You want to preempt them?
Yes.
Start telling you all the yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Adist.
I could see you were going into the details, Julian, but you were sounding like an MP earlier on. We cannot broadcast the questions. Can we try and broadcast the questions? We want to now become more focused in this next part of the discussion. Our idea is that we have the right mix of people in the room: fintech, banking, telecom, NITA-U, and not just in the room, but also online. Our thinking is we have about 4 questions that are around access, inclusion, infrastructure, and we want to understand from your perspective how exactly these 4 core areas for scaling up the use of digital financial services to enable social grant programs. I think we're very fortunate that the people we reached out to are already advanced in this discussion, so we don't have to waste so much time with introductory speak about what is G2P. This is the right room, the right group of people online and here. So we will just dive into these technical questions, 4 of them. We would like you to take a look at them, and you can start off by giving us your best answers to any of these questions in no particular order. It's open to the forum, including those online. So as we await the projector, I'm just going to list the questions to you all. I'll start with one that is, they're all linked to each other, so it makes a lot of sense. The very first question is one on access. So the question is, what is the role and responsibility of your sector and institution to unlock barriers and extend the reach of digital financial services to remote areas and communities. You could take note as we wait for the projector. Sorry, yeah. The second question is around infrastructure. How can stakeholders, private sector, donor, and government align to address national broadband teleconnectivity infrastructure gaps around? We talked about registries and being able to talk to the last mile. If it's about cost structure, if you're looking at, Andrew used to talk a lot about this intervention of an aggregator system that really works. So again, let us use our experienced minds to think about the infrastructure gaps and how to reach rural communities. And if you will, what existing mapping tools can be used by stakeholders to better inform beneficiary selection for social grant programs. The third question is around inclusion. What are some of the digital financial literacy, or not just financial literacy, but digital interventions that can be deployed to remote and vulnerable populations? The last question, which should be the one where we have now come to good thinking, is around design scenarios. What would be the right mix of digital access channels to serve social grant beneficiaries? Those are the 4 questions we are hoping to explore from the technical minds in here. If something comes up to you even just now, just put on the microphone so we can try and understand. I can go through these questions again as soon as we get technology back up. I'll stop right there and just give you a second to process, and then you can come back to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My name is Nathan Buku from Equity. On access, for us as banks, we're supposed to create the infrastructure itself, the customer-facing infrastructure. At the end here, we have the registry and the payment e-payment platform. So we are not processing. It is processing at the center. Then the money hits the bank accounts. So as we need now the payment point infrastructure, the agents, the merchants, and the agent, merchant, ATMs, branches, and all that. But before there, then the partners who you are working with, or maybe the communities, you need to do a lot of outreach. Our runnings now is communities themselves are unique, and you'll need to address and align yourselves to them. So it's not about a top-bottom approach. It's even if we sit here and design a payment, maybe a payment system, it is important we go back to them and listen, coming up, bottom-up approach to ensure that we identify their specific needs. The other one is ensuring security of funds and security of beneficiaries. So for us, we have really stuck to the biometric authentication to ensure that the person whose biometrics you are holding is the one who is cashing out. But you also don't need to be rigid at that point. You also need to allow alternate recipients, or you need to be flexible enough to ensure that it's not only the target person who you can serve. There must be ways of other caregivers to be able also to come in play and access securely. And you also need to have ability to control. If a caregiver needs to be withdrawn, it's a quick click of a button and the caregiver is withdrawn. So at the design of the product, you must also design a product that answers to these communities, products that are specifically for them, and that you need their input. It's not, as I said, a bottom up. Then at the point of creating the points of payments, you need also to think of not only now delivering the cash or delivering the product, but the ecosystem that moves backwards in terms of supplies, the demand side. So if I am dropping 2 billion shillings in a village somewhere in Nakapiripiriti, so where are the 2 billion worth of goods going to come from? So as a bank, what we have done is to ensure that we flip it. Because when they spend, we may not be able to tell them to put their money in the bank account. So we have flipped it. So we work on ensuring the 2 billion goods are in the market, and the person who is offering the 2 billion goods is my customer also. So I'm able to support them to be able to deliver the goods. Then, of course, now in the payment system, you need to identify the players, make sure they are well aligned, they are trained, they have safeguarding training in terms of sexual exploitation and abuse. You protect the beneficiary because some of them are illiterate, so you may not need to give them digital tools that require PIN. I am not against my friend here, but I'm saying if you give PIN to a lady, she cannot secure that PIN. She may need to write it on the phone or somewhere. So again, that may not work. So if you are going to adopt biometrics to be able to serve. Then the other thing is supporting the operations, ensuring that if you promise that you shall deliver cash, the cash is there. If you promise you are delivering goods, the goods are available. So they can cash out and spend, or they can directly spend digitally. In terms of sustainability, you need to create systems with sustainability such that if you go and plant a branch, then what happens when these people stop receiving this aid? So you need to ensure that there is sustainable access such that even if the aid or the assistance is withdrawn, you have created sufficient sustainability that will continue supporting the operations of that branch. Then the other thing is we have also learned to participate in their own other activities to ensure we align our activities to them. For example, if it is distribution and access, we ensure it's done during market days. So you are bringing people on board when there is a market. So somebody can withdraw. If they are coming 2 kilometers away, they spend that same day, rather than paying today and then tomorrow they have to come back to attend the market. The other is the agent networks we've been using. We ensure they are business people. I know mobile money, you can do it standalone, but we tell them, can you have a business, so that we make the case stronger. So the business person who does that, or the agent who does that, has double benefit. They can earn commissions from the service provider, and they are also in business of selling, and then we can also adopt them to do digital delivery. So we have 2 options. They are able to do cash delivery, they earn commission from the bank. They are able to do goods, they earn profits, and so they become champions of this, and they guard it with their lives, actually, to ensure that it's free of fraud, it is free of information flows easily, complaints are managed, because it is part of what is sustaining their lives. So we have run a few lessons around that, particularly in terms of ensuring agents are at the center. Yeah, for now, that's it. I'll handle other questions.
Nathan, I have a follow-on question to what you said. So in the earlier discussion this morning, the issue of ensuring that, and also Andrew touched upon it, that we need to make sure that the money can still be, to whatever extent possible, used digitally. But I want you to juxtapose for us the scenario that you face when you're serving a community, which I'd call like a closed, almost semi-densely populated community like Nachivale, is very different from some of the work you do in other remote areas. And I think the challenges there are different and would be what we would run into in some of these beneficiary locations that we're envisioning. Any lessons to share when the context is different from its closed loop? You kind of already know that these people are situated here, there's a trading center within the settlement. Once it's not such a controlled environment, what are some of the lessons?
Okay, outside controlled environments, one of the things we've done is to ensure that we create capacity within the communities where these people are living. So you find a village, no shop. So you identify a local teacher, you identify the LC1, and then you work together. He identifies whether he can start a business or a shop, and then you give him capacity so that he's able now to start providing these goods and also providing the cash.
And this is done at the payment service provider's cost, the identification, the onboarding, the training,
Yes,
the financing, the early financing.
Yes. It is integrated in the payment service provider's business, such that you are able to identify the teacher, bank him, provide credit, then make him an agent, and from there he starts delivering the service of either merchant or agent. Thank you.
Nathan, thank you. I think from what you're saying, this business case has been thought through and it is possible. And it makes sense and it's sustainable. Is that what you're saying?
We have, of course, to pilot to ensure we are on the right track, but I don't see any gaps.
Okay, thank you. More reflections? Oh, sorry, Fatima, you wanted to respond to something.
Yes, I just wanted to comment. I think it's really interesting you're mentioning this model. So if we look at what the current programs the bank is financing on social protection, what one is, I think most of you know, is Dr. DIP, Development Impact for Displacement Response. And then the other is NUSAF, which ended, but we're looking at, the next phase operation. So there, the interventions by themselves are creating this capacity, right? So we're giving this income support, as well as there's a livelihood component where you're encouraging them to have savings, you're developing a revolving fund, and then the idea is that they actually go and end up having micro enterprises and they're diversifying their income. So I think one can look at that some of this, which from what I've understood you're saying, this is a very important aspect of sustainability, but it also comes as a cost, right? Now that cost is in a way inbuilt as investment in now the social protection program. So, you can really look at, making it very much, as you also highlighted, part of the ecosystem, that the investment you're doing in building this capacity, those same beneficiaries then can become, part of your agent banking system. They're part of your agent, because I know earlier there was this discussion, of course, about cost and the fact that this profile of beneficiaries, because they're the poor and vulnerable. So one, because it is mostly focused on consumption smoothing. So they cash out once and then, that's it. They extract the money and then it's like, from your perspective, it's a one-time, if I'm allowed to be blunt, it's a sunk cost, right? But if we look at these programs and the fact that if we're doing them at scale, this consumption smoothing, from our experience, even in northern areas of Uganda, so NUSAF is implemented in some of the most remote areas, is because the payments they're predictable and they are at a certain volume, even though initially they start off as consumption smoothing, they do generate economic activity. And then, you start to, it is your store at the corner, but then if they're investing in some of the agriculture output, then that ecosystem starts. So I mean, this is what our experience is, that as much as it starts off by seeming it's just consumption smoothing, it starts to translate into economic activity in the area, and that I think is something we can really build upon.
I believe that the current approach is that funds are dispersed either to someone's bank account or to an MNO wallet, and then they cash out. Where there are no bank agents, banks have arrangements where they deliver cash to the beneficiaries. And for MNOs, it's a mobile money agent, and sometimes you have to, arrange with the super agent to make sure that there's cash available for mobile money agents to cash out. Now, we work with SACCOs and savings groups, and I can tell you that SACCOs and savings groups hold the largest amounts of cash in those villages, right? So I believe that SACCOs and savings groups could actually play a very big role as cash out points for these funds. And you know what's really interesting is that most of these SACCOs, in the case of SACCOs, for example, most of them keep their reserves of their money in a bank. They all have bank accounts. And the uniqueness about it is that it's aggregated accounts. It's one account for 10,000 people. Right? So it is not 10,000 bank accounts. So if they have an account at Centenary Bank or Equity Bank, it's one single account that serves 10,000 individuals. And that account is mapped to 10,000 other accounts at a SACCO, right? And those accounts at the SACCO hold value. And these people can walk into the SACCO and pull cash, and SACCOs have the capacity to provide that amount of cash. But also we've done integrations with the MNOs, Airtel and MTN. If you actually go on Airtel and MTN's menu, under financial services, we have a SACCO menu, right? And they can now use mobile money wherever they are. They don't have to walk into the SACCO to cash out. They can use their mobile money, Airtel money or MTN Momo, walk into an agent and cash out from their SACCO account, right? Just using their SACCO account number. They don't need to have a bank account. I think that there is a lot of ways that we could build use cases to allow SACCOs and VSLAs become cash out points. And the advantage of doing that is one, that you cut costs, because you're not doing 10,000 disbursements. You're doing one single disbursement to a bank account of a SACCO, and working with fintechs like us, you're able to, there's a lot of notification APIs that allows us to credit the accounts of the SACCO member, their SACCO, when that disbursement has been made to the bank account of the SACCO. That's possible. Technology can enable that. We've done it in so many other use cases. It's possible to do it with these use cases as well. And then the beneficiary could walk into the SACCO, or they could use mobile money to cash out. But to enable that, like I said, we need very strong collaborations with fintechs included, and also I think this, for me, also addresses a lot of the other concerns we have about inclusion. How do we educate people on how to use these services? People already know how to access funds from a SACCO, so there's not a lot of education that needs to be done. So I think that that's probably my contribution from my perspective of the sector where I currently operate. Yeah.
I like that. Very quickly.
Sorry, Ernest. Can I just interject quickly, just based on what the gentleman has said? Apologies, I might have missed your name. I'm going to start my video. Just as a follow-up, it seems to me that there actually is access to digital financial payment solutions. In the earlier sessions, we heard that there are issues of identification documents that may limit access. I would just like to follow up and ask, how are you circumventing that? How are you perhaps bypassing the need for IDs, or while IDs are still catching up to full subscription? How are people being helped accessing financial solutions without these official documents? Because I think it was also in the morning session, we heard that it needs to be the person, in order for a person to access the mobile money, the person's ID needs to match what information is available on the SIM card, right? So it would be good if you could make that clarification. Thank you.
So just to start off, SACCOs and savings groups are member-based organizations. They are really, they are formed out of their mutual group. It's people in a community that know each other, that come together and create a SACCO. Now, before they are digitized, they have a member number, And that's way before national IDs even came into play. And that member number was really the unique identifier for them. Now, with digitization, this is what we're doing now with SACCOs. We're able to map their member ID, which is like the account number of the SACCO, to phone numbers and national IDs, right? So those are the things that we're now doing to be able to, where of course there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with the, access to the nearest ID system. That's an issue for fintechs and for a lot of other companies as well. Access to the teleco database to validate phone numbers is still an issue that still needs to be addressed. And all those are things that I hope that we will be able to address if we decide to pilot something around that. But I think that what SACCOs and VSLAs really do is provide a certain level of identification that is really based on local knowledge. Like people know each other, and each of them have a unique way that they identify each other within that group. So if it's a VSLA, it's 30 people in a village that know each other, right? And there's just no way that you can access money from a SACCO, a VSLA, if you're actually not a member and if you're not known within that entity.
Thank you so much, Gerald. I wanted to very quickly just ask you, and this won't be very long. In the most deep rural settings, has the SACCO VSLA model actually worked in this, outside of the limitations of ID and all of those things, which you are hoping will be sorted in the near future? You sounded like you have a lot of faith in the model of SACCOs and VSLAs at the most rural level. Has that been your experience?
Yes. We work with, we now work with about 120 SACCOs and about 1,500 VSLAs at the moment that are fully digitized. And a lot of these are in very remote areas. They're in very remote areas, including refugee settlements. We've worked with a lot of partner organizations to digitize VSLAs in refugee settlements, and it works. There is an investment initially in the digitization process because they're using technology for the first time. But that's what we fintechs do. That's our problem to solve. Right? Once we have solved that, we have established an infrastructure that we believe other players can ride on to deliver financial services to the very last mile. So in my personal opinion, I don't think that there is need to invest heavily in delivering cash to the last mile in communities where SACCOs and VSLAs actually exist. I just think what needs to happen is to map out collaborations and partnerships between financial service providers, MNOs, and SACCOs and savings groups to deliver these services through that ecosystem.
Thank you, Gerald. Feedback from other stakeholders in the room? I could also give you a second as you get back to it. Please project on the screen the questions. There's feedback on the chat, which is from David Kajova. He says, access design. He says, the appreciation of challenges that are experienced across various sectors in the country, such as agriculture, microfinance, health, business, education, presents a need to innovate and enable a payments gateway that interlinks across all these sectors. It is, however, to note that with the majority of people in these sectors being unbanked, the bank plays a key important role to guarantee safety of money, while the MNOs, payment aggregators, play a key role at providing the best convenient payment systems to access the various services that may be needed. With the regulator providing the best rates to enable paying at the lowest costs, the design of the platforms should enable settlement within the bank ecosystem for safety, with notification, while access should be extended to multiple access areas such as USSD, WhatsApp, bot, web apps, etc. Digital technology platforms such as Center Invest, Center Swift present opportunities for rural communities by enabling the urban. Mr. Jingo, I think one of your staff members is really campaigning heavily. Sorry, we didn't hear that.
Well, he supports my tech side.
He supports your tech side.
Yeah, if you may give me an opportunity, I'll elaborate.
Yes, please do.
Well, I agree with my colleague from Sibuko. We actually work together on other fronts, but I would actually depart on some tenets of inclusion. Well, I bank over 3,000 circles and over 30,000 VSLAs, of course, given my footprint. But again, picking learnings from SAGE, where we are in all districts, I will tell you that the availability of VSLAs, because that is the smaller component, the smaller version of the circle or ROSCAs, is in less than 60% of the communities that we work in. So it is actually not that widespread. Well, we could embark on an activity of forming VSLAs and ROSCAs, but that is another matter. I would go for the ecosystem, the systems that have the interoperability, whereby we can avail an array of solutions for our people. Of course, coupled with the connectivity challenge that I complained about. I'll tell you that we serve the VSLAs, but again, they struggle to be able to pick their money. We have the 3-pin solution, whereby they're able to use their phones to pick money, but they will get to the agent and there is no money. And the reason why the agent doesn't keep the money, because there is no connectivity, so will not have to keep money to transact. So it is a bigger challenge. The infrastructure actually must support to be able to have these solutions in. Then the other matter is, again, around what we support as banks. That is privacy of data. Well, you would say, I'm a member of the VSLA, but I wouldn't want to pick my money from the VSLA. That happens. So that's why I would say, if you give an array of solutions, I could choose a VSLA, I could choose a bank, I could choose my wallet from an MN or a wallet from an NPSA regulated player. So I would go for an array of solutions. Then you're able to pick any wallet, any solution where you feel the privacy of your data is actually catered for. Because many of these beneficiaries, I would say, wouldn't want to know, wouldn't want to inform very many people, especially those in their communities. I had another project called Casimo, and many of our old people have been waylaid and caned, then they lose their money, or they are taken to the bars by force to buy pints, to buy beers for the village, because they know they are going to get the money. So privacy regarding receipt of such monies should also be catered for. So it's not, and you know, for VSLAs, they are small communities. The smaller the community, the lesser the privacy. But if it's a bigger community, say you're dealing with a bank, you go in, you will not even know the people who are in there. That is also another matter that we need to consider. So with an array of solutions, you actually can cater for the privacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any further reflections? Andrew, do you have any reflections from any of these three questions?
Yes, just a few. Thank you very much. And Andrew Rugamba again from Airtel Uganda. So in regards to access, specifically what our sector provides is, we look at it in two ways. We have put down the investment in network, and we've put down the investment in platform. I know everybody expects that the MNOs or the NPS regulated entities are going to do the last mile as well, but I would like to look at it slightly differently. We are enabling platforms, and in that breadth, what we have done, for example, is create this whole 4G network across the entire country. Now, this network is useless on its own. It needs use cases. So as an enabler, the idea really is to provide the network to enable everybody else to build and utilize that network to support beneficiaries. Same applies to the platform. So the Airtel Money platform is built in such a way, or has been enhanced in such a way that we have standardized APIs. Yes, we provide a variety of use cases to beneficiaries and people in the remote areas, but the standardization of these APIs is to enable any other player, fintechs, any innovators, these days I hear of agrotechs, to come in and use this same platform to be able to deliver capabilities or use cases or whatever else they can innovate on top of this platform to provide support for beneficiaries. And I'll give you a clear example. We've been talking about creating capability for the beneficiaries to utilize the funds that they receive. We've also talked about how when money is disbursed into a particular geographical area, it changes the economy of that area. Now, all of that goes hand in hand with what people are doing. So we enable people that build use cases around those enhancements in the economy to be able to use our platform to serve their customers. A clear example is the more people receive money in a particular geographical area, the more things like the health sector in that area will develop, because now more people can access health. But how do they access health? And that's where the fintechs that play a big role in health come into play. Can we integrate with Airtel Money so people can pay for health services using Airtel Money? SACCOs, like Gerald has said, we are open for business, for everybody to come and integrate with us to be able to build up a whole ecosystem. In regards to the question on infrastructure and how can stakeholders play a role in this, I think with infrastructure, the key thing, the regulator plays a very big role as the lead of the government strategy in this area. There are very many areas that are hard to reach. And I say hard to reach in two senses. Number one, hard to reach in terms of terrain or physically, making the cost of investment in that area astronomical, but also hard to reach because you may not recoup your investment in certain areas by virtue of population size, GDPs of those areas, and so on and so forth. And in those areas, to be able to provide services, subsidies play a big role to support partners to be able to, be it invest in network coverage or agent networks or things like that. More to this, we need to create more and more use cases of shared infrastructure. If you see our agent base now, you realize that a lot of our agents are shared agents. This brings down the cost of serving the customer. So we need to take a deliberate action to say, where can we leverage on our synergies? Where can we converge more and more to solve that infrastructure burden? So you also have areas of taxation that we can benefit from. We all know that the smartphone is a miracle worker in the DFS space. Digital financial services just work beautifully on smartphones, but we still tax importation of smartphones in this country. I know some of our regional neighbors have removed the taxes on smartphones. This is an area that we could also lobby for as the World Bank or as our regulator to support increase the penetration of these devices. So in regards to inclusion and literacy of digital financial services, the way I like to look at it, the more you simplify something, the less you have to explain it. The more we simplify our use cases to our beneficiaries, in terms of what are the channels that we deliver the grants or the benefits to our beneficiaries through, what is the technology that we are using at the last mile, okay? The simpler it can be. I have seen USSD menus that are harder to understand than a PhD thesis. We need to provide very simple, easy to use solutions, and that will reduce the time and the money we spend on educating. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to very quickly jump into some of our colleagues online. Stephen, do you have any reflections on some of the... I mean, I'm directly going to Stephen because I know that there's two categories of people online. One, there's the group from Centenary Bank and there's the group from MTN, and the guys of Centenary have already spoken. So, Stephen, do you have any reflections on the questions that we put up for discussion around access, around infrastructure, around inclusion and design scenarios, you and your colleagues, in a very quick sort of format?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ernst. Good morning to the team in the US, and good afternoon or good evening to the team in Uganda. Sorry, Stephen had to drop off because of an emergency. And my name is Sandra Namazi in the Strategic Partnerships Department. So yes, we have a contribution to make in regards to inclusion and also in regards to the design scenarios. So for the design scenarios, I believe this is a technology aspect of digitizing and making sure that the vulnerable team, the persons of concern, the refugees and the women can adapt to the use of USSD and apps. And in that aspect, there's a lot of training that needs to be done, and some of the use of these technologies can be done via USSD. We've seen some of the trainings done for agents. There's a training we had with the GSMA and Grameen, where we had to do on-the-phone training for the MTN agents on how to handle persons of interest. So on the design scenarios, there are so many things we can do to make sure that the women, the vulnerable teams, and the persons of concerns are catered for in the technological aspect. And then also, so for inclusion, we have partnered with different bodies, especially under the UN, and we have made sure that we are training farmers and refugees in areas of West Nile, northern Uganda. These are 16 districts in total, and we're ensuring that they can do digital payments, via mobile money. We're training them how to become Momo Pay merchants, So we helping include everyone, and we give a thanks also to the UNCDF for being our partner in this collaboration for the last 2 years. So there is much we can do, and much that we're doing on the ground right now, and we are happy to even take on this discussion further. Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't turn on my video, but I can do that now. I wanted to put it on at the start, and I didn't.
Yes, please do. We don't want to pass you by in Kampala.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Anne.
We're waiting the video, and then as Fatima comes on, she wants to say something. You have to know who you're talking to. This might be your enemy if you don't get it right. Put up the video for the chat. Oh, there we are. She wears the Airtel colors, but she's with MTN.
Yes. We collaborate, so we're in this together. So hi, Andrew.
Hi, Sandra. How are you?
Hi, Sandra.
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Fatima.
Thank you so much, Ernest. I'm sure others will want to come in, but while we're waiting for so many last words, I'm conscious of time. I just wanted to take us back to one thing which was implicit in the questions, but I don't think anyone covered, but all of you talked about it earlier, was data. And, the lack of data systems, and you talked about, so actually, as you know, as the World Bank, we work very closely with the Ministry of Gender, and we were part of that, COVID response at the back end. And like you said, we really struggled because COVID showed us that this is a new set of beneficiaries, right? And when that cash transfer was announced, it was urban, and a lot of our programs like NUSAF, Dr. DIP, the SAGE, they are, very specific and have specific characteristics. And of course, they're now part of this emerging single registry. So these are just reflections, but I would really like to test the waters with all of you for your thoughts. And of course, then we can take this discussion further. So in a lot of countries which have had large-scale social protection programs and that have invested in these registries, one of the barriers has been cost, right? Because if you go and it's survey-based, and you have to go and you look at the poverty and vulnerability statistics, and of course then you digitize, and there is an initial cost that comes in, and where we are with the fiscal situation. And then of course, once you get the system up and running, there is some cost. Those that have been static, of course, you have this risk that the data is getting old, but the ones that are dynamic, then you try to look at, you're doing rounds of self-registration and having citizens come in. Now, just by way of background, so we as a team, and Office of the Prime Minister and Ministry of Gender was here this morning, and with Bank being in this space of social protection, where we want to bring the digital payments and the registry part closer together, is we're trying, so we have done the digitization based on the program MISs of these programs that are, I mentioned. And then, of course, we have the opportunity with the rollout of the parish development model because there's an emphasis on community data. So what we really want to do is look at the administrative data that is being collected, again, not to make it complicated, maybe looking at a few poverty and vulnerability statistics and how we can use that to digitize and, link this to some of these databases. Having said that, I just want to bring it more to, the colleagues in the room, and I know Andrew stepped out, is we discussed this briefly, and it was mentioned earlier, is how can we do some data mining? So there is some very interesting, experiments that have been done in different parts of the world. So especially it can work when you have a covariate shock, say, in an area where there's drought or flash floods, right? Which, frankly, regardless maybe of poverty levels, everybody is affected. So you can do kind of a blanket distribution. But even with COVID, like when we had this COVID grant that was announced by the president, one of the things we suggested was that, and you wanted to do mobile payments, so you had to have the NIN. And we said, can you look at the, where you have pockets of low-income areas, and, you have slums, and you have these same pockets, in rural areas. And then this other, and what you do is you mirror that with, and I asked this earlier, is like in Pakistan, where there is a safety net program similar to here, where the national ID card is very closely linked, but each person is mapped to a family tree. So even though we're saying that you have one person who, there is low right now coverage, I think it's just 60% of having a mobile device or a SIM. But if you know the profile of that one person, and then can you, have it as an indication of the household. So these are just some of the things that is there possibility, because we also have to be practical that we cannot do this large survey, right? How do we use some existing data, including data mining from the current mobile coverage? One last thing to add is, again, because we have the regulator in the room, this is also about privacy issues, is even though some of the things we have talked about is, of course, we want to reduce transaction cost of the beneficiaries. But what is also interesting is if you're doing data mining, especially from, telecom use, and where you have mobile payments, can you look at what have been, an average spend of certain users, and especially if they're at the lower end, can we take that as a proxy of, some kind of income range, and that you use that as a basis? So you do that initial data mining, and then you go and you do some of your survey data collection, so that actually reduces your cost rather than, starting off by doing a survey. So maybe this may be several different things I've highlighted, but it's just to put on the table, given all of you recognize that data is something very important, and that is one of the main barriers. And the World Bank is very committed to looking at investing in this. The next phase of the NISAF operation that we're looking at is we're very committed to having a scaled up component on the systems building agenda, which includes registration, scaling up of digital payments. And we would really like to hear some innovations, your thoughts on how we can, reduce the cost. And like you said, I really take the point that you invest once and then, everybody is able to use it. That, frankly, I feel is not even a choice thing. That should be our default position, because that's the only way to go, because it's not hidden from anyone because of the overall impact of COVID. What is the fiscal situation, right? So we really need to be prudent in the investment we have. So I just wanted to get some reflections on that, because I think we covered of most of the areas, but data, something which was mentioned earlier, we didn't get a chance to get reflections on it. Thank you.
Yes, I wanted to add on infrastructure in terms of the technology we can use because of the challenge of network, and I'm seated next to a telco here, and I'm really suffering with network. And the challenge, one of the challenge, and is something that the telcos, they said they work together, and you really show that you work together because you know each other very well. But it seems you really don't talk to each other, because you will go to a location and find both of you are there, but a few meters away, both of you are not there. Why can't you spread and one covers the other edge and the one covers in your collaboration discussion next time? Please try and map that so that you are able to be much more wider. The other one is we have now resorted to using very technology that requires very low connectivity, or that really, uses very low connectivity. You have to more or less resort to some offline sort of, a bridge between offline and online, where you authenticate offline and then you approve the transaction. You authenticate offline, you approve the transaction online. Because if we are using a biometric, you don't have sufficient network to carry a biometric file across that network. So we have defaulted to use that technology, and it is not very sustainable, because what happens is you store the data. If the device where you are stored is destroyed, you need to recapture the data, or you need to load it again. In terms of inclusion, the various financial literacy interventions, for refugees, there has been use of like public screens as a mode of delivering information to them. So these public screens are hung in public places, locations where they access, and the content is developed, and very straightforward content that is easily understood. In terms of design scenarios, I was looking at assisted cash, where we use an agency model, self-service, which each one of us here would wish if we could adopt a self-service platform, where I receive the money, I spend it myself, and it goes into an account of either a merchant, and then we can also have conditional goods or conditional grants, where we are going to use digital goods. So it is not delivering cash now, it's delivering goods. And then we now have the merchants working hard to have the goods, and then the ecosystem works because it is the good that is being provided, not the money. The value is the good. So if it's food being provided, yeah. In terms of the registry, there is need to, at the point of creating the registry, to capture as much data as possible. In Kenya, the data that was captured during registration encompasses the entire individual, the household members, what kind of work you do.
So if there is a need to target from the registry, it's very easy because you can be able to tell if you live in a certain location, you are a teacher, so you are not vulnerable now. But if there is drought, you are actually the first person to be targeted because either you have out of work or something. So if there is a natural disaster, you are also able to know who is first affected. Like the way we were saying, the security people need to be fascinated first. We are able to have those segmented groups of people who you can easily identify. I think that's all from me.
And if you'd allow me to just respond very quickly.
Yes, you chose a very good seat for a friend.
Yes, and this clearly ties into our role when we spoke about access earlier, it ties into our role as an enabler, just what you spoke about. Just briefly, when you're building a network in certain areas, you put up your infrastructure because at that time when you put it up, your population that you're covering is in a certain area, and the activities are in a certain area. But over time, this changes. So the optimization of the network is a continuous process. Now, the role that we play as an enabler, providing this infrastructure, we provide room for feedback. And I openly say this to everybody. We are open. If you tell us that in a particular area the coverage is low or the coverage is insufficient or there's no coverage whatsoever, we quickly rush in and we re-optimize. In many of these instances, you find it is just repointing an antenna and that area is covered. The other way the other role that we play is the investment in the various technologies. You'll realize that not too long ago, we used to use CDMA for connectivity, and that was graduated to Edge and then 2G. We are now at 4G, and 4G opens up so many more capabilities. You can run applications that require much higher capacity and much higher speeds. So this is what we're trying to do as an enabler. So putting down that investment on 4G is one of the ways in which we're trying to say, look, as a bank, you can actually extend your core banking to a very remote area in Karamoja, and your beneficiary or your customer should have the exact same experience as they would if they were in central Kampala. So please just reach out in case of any shortfalls in any of the areas. We're happy to quickly come in and have that resolved. Thank you.
Keep your friends close. I'm keeping one eye on the time. It's 4:41 p.m. I believe you people have done us a great solid for coming to this meeting. So, okay, that's nice. My enemies are back. So to wrap this up, I would kindly like us to just do one last thing. Julian, I would like to hear from you. Just maybe a few things that you can reflect to our questions. You don't have to answer all of them. I believe there might be one that you really want to speak to. Answer us. And then after that, I would like the team, whoever felt compelled, please respond to the good question from Fatima about data, because it will be crucial for us when we're going into pilot design and scaling up of programs like NUSAF. So those two questions, and then because there is always another opportunity to take these discussions further, we will stay in touch with each one of you. Please respond to us if we ask you for further information. Martha, stop asking for permission every time we ask you for basic clerical questions, like what's the coverage in a BIM. Those are clerical questions. You don't need the chief commercial officer to approve. Thank you. Please go on, Julian.
Okay, thank you, Ernest. Actually, for me, after listening to many people, they have done these things before. And for us, from our side as government and as a regulator, we want to work with everyone. And for me, as long as build once, reuse, we can use whatever platform as long as it's going to be one that government will use throughout, so that we don't have to repeat this. So I don't have like much to add other than if there's a gap in connectivity on the infrastructure side, especially remote areas where the private sector cannot invest in, then NITA can come in and look at those areas. There was an interesting comment whether like now they're even building connectivity, they're providing connectivity to the elephants. There was some caption where they were taking connectivity to the national parks. They haven't even failed to give us, now they're giving it to the elephants. So yes, we, as long as the design, whatever it is, and there's a gap, we can come in and support. We just need to work together as a team and come up with a solution. In terms of infrastructure that exists, please do not replicate. That's all we can say. Thank you.
That's a good parting warning in a very calm way. Do not go and duplicate Airtel and MTN. Thank you. Sandra, online, you said you wanted to respond to the question of data. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Julian, for the support that NITA is giving the telcos. We really appreciate that. Just before I deep dive into the data question that was asked earlier, I would also like to add on Andrew's voice. Yes, in case anyone experiences a network challenge, please reach out to us. We're always happy to boost the network where poor, and also just to highlight what the gentleman said. Sorry, I forgot to jot down your name. We also nowadays, share the mass. There is something we're doing as telecos, so we really talk to each other. I was even talking to Andrew just a few days ago. I think yesterday, but one. So we really talk to each other, and then also we co-share the mass. So we've gone are the days where we don't really talk to each other. We really do. I just wanted to highlight that, and also for the infrastructure where we can, we share the mass and make sure that network in most places is good. And going back to the data question, yes. So we can provide the data. All we need to do with the World Bank is share an NDA and capture what special data you would like us to provide as a teleco, in particular MTN. And then also, I would like to highlight that we did that for, like rightfully said, for the disbursement of the COVID funds. We also almost did it for Give Directly again in lockdown, the first lockdown, where we shared this data. I worked on that project with the team from MTN and Give Directly as a persons of interest body. They look after the refugees. So this data can be shared. We sign NDAs, MOUs, and also get to deep dive on the kind of data you need. I know you highlighted mobile money usage. You would like to know how much money people are using, or Sandra as an individual is using, and what qualifies her to the vulnerability category. So we have all that, and we usually work together with the partners. In this case, World Bank. You let us know what you want us to cover, and then we go ahead to use those statistics or data to give you what you want. So yes, we have data sharing given as a service. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated, Sandra online. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is time for us to put this meeting to a close. I am so grateful that Sandra has ended it on this note that we should reach out for data, and as long as we sign an NDA, that will make things work. Andrew, now that you are deputy of a separated company, I don't think that you need us to tell you that we should also sign an NDA and you provide us this info without waiting for a chief commercial officer or those kind of things.
Can I just add something there?
Yes.
So there are two types of data that normally are required by players like yourselves. One is customer data, customer information. Who is this beneficiary? How old are they? Are they male or female? What's the name, phone number, and things like that. Then there is usage data. What are the trends we see on our platforms, on our various platforms? Where are people using? What are the use cases? What are the demographics and things like that? So customer data is protected by law. So we have to be very cognizant of that law, and we have to be very careful when we're dealing with customer data. All customer data can be achieved with consent of the customer. Once the customer gives consent in either a use a user journey or anything, unlimited share. Other than that, we have to be very careful that we're not on the wrong side of the law, because we're very compliant and very law-abiding entities. Now, in regards to usage data as well, that can always be discussed. We can always go into NDAs, like Sandra just said, and agree on how this can be managed. But the bottom line is to say, look, with compliance in place and us doing things legally and in the right way, this information exists and can be leveraged to improve service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. In fact, and also just to highlight that one of the sub pieces of this work is that we have actually a policy and regulatory sub report, and we've already benefited from some very good engagement with UCC, with NITA-U, with the National Data Protection and Privacy Office, and the like. So we're fully aware of some of these constraints, and in fact, we would want to work with you within those. Quite frankly speaking, I think most of the intended request around the data picture is around usage and mapping of how things go, versus asking for personal data, because that in itself would not work with global practice of the World Bank, the way that we understand government-to-person payments, the way that we understand digital financial services. That would go contrary to what we are trying to achieve. And that's why even when we move to the next sub-report, we'll be happy to share it with you, the one on policy and regulation that just looks at that part. We want to thank you. Our last request is that when we send you an email, do reply. Thank you so much for coming to this meeting. From myself and the team, Fatima, Bongisa in South Africa, and Delia, we really appreciate that you've come to meet with us on Friday afternoon. We have no vouchers for after party, but we have coffee. We have coffee and tea, so do stick around. This gentleman, I'm sorry I didn't know who you are. If you could just say who you are real quickly so we can know who you are.
Yeah, so this is Jerry Luebuga. I'm within Civico.
Thank you. I thought you were a journalist.
Yeah.
This was not going to be a good ending.
Yeah, so I lead special projects and strategic partnerships.
All right, thank you so much. Have yourselves a good evening. And for our colleagues who joined online, Sandra, Kajoba, the team from the banks, thank you so much. We appreciate that you were part of this discussion. Stephen and them all, have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate all of you.
Thank you, everyone.